It transformed the look of magazines, the typography, the colour, the style. These magazines not only looked good, they danced, they sang, they communicated just in their own right.
I genuinely believe that smash hits changed the English language. Please, spelled P-U-R-Lees, exclamation mark. That was a smash hits expression which you get all the time.
Smash hits has had this massive influence on the way people speak, on the way that they treat celebrity, which is now permeated right across all of newspapers, all media. Most evident in something like Heat, but equally evident in something like the Sunday Times.
Yeah, that's cool. 3, 2, 1. Nice.
March 2003, and Blue are being shot for the cover of Smash Hits. Today, in a trivia-obsessed world, it is only one of the many magazines battling to attract top pop stars. It wasn't always this way. 25 years ago, being a teenager in Britain was like living in Cold War Poland. Post-punk Britain was grey and broke. The tabloids and telly basically ignored pop, and the only places to read about music were in the black and white serious rock papers like the New Musical Express. But that all changed on October the 10th, 1978, when Smash Hits was born, bringing colour and irreverence to pop fans across the land.
At the end of the day, this is pop music, and it probably doesn't matter very much, but yet it is there to entertain you, and it is a very important thing.
I sat down once in a room in a terrible old office in Carnaby Street, and I typed out, actually typed, imagine that, a circular which I sent round to all the heads of press at record companies and said, we at Smash Hits are planning to reverse the tide of music coverage entirely in the direction of trivia. Henceforth, we are really genuinely interested in the colour of people's socks. Seriously, we are. And we got some very shirty responses, really, that you can't possibly expect Pete Shelley out of the Buzzcocks to, you know, vouchsafe that kind of information.
I do remember them once asking me if I'd thrown up in my shoes.
What coloured socks do you wear, and, you know, what's your favourite food?
Would you ever grow your hair long enough to sit on it?
What do you first do when you wake up in the morning? Who do you fancy? I go up with Gareth.
What's my favourite colour? To be honest, who cares?
Everyone goes, oh, Smash Hits is just like, what's your favourite colour? And we never ask that. The only thing we ever asked would be something like, what colour is Tuesday, just to see if somebody could use their head or not.
We always found, and I still find myself to this day, that in interviews, people like those kind of questions. They can be much more revealing than you think. You ask someone from a heavy metal band, does your mother play golf? And actually, you get quite a lot about their family, stroke, class background of that question. Do you know anyone called Quentin? We asked Brian Ferry, and of course he did.
Look, this is the strangest question. If they invented a toilet that could wipe your bum automatically, would you get one?
What do we put? James says no, because I like to be in charge of my own bottom. That's where the bottom quote came from.
Despite its innovative form of interrogation, in its early edition, Smash Hits was competing with the traditional music press for the same stars, those post-punk stars who had reached the charts. But one man and his band would change all that.
Adam was the first Smash Hits pop star, because Adam was very much addressed specifically to a teenage audience.
Do you plan your makeup before you put it on?
Yeah, I do. It takes about an hour.
The aim of the band was to make great eccentric pop singles, which sold lots of copies. Very much wanted to create it. We were very much a visual band, and we wanted to make vid.
If you were to compare Westlife next to Adamant,
everybody's looking for that something.
They're fundamentally selling to a similar audience. Young girls going right down to 7- and 8-year-olds. Because they might be on the cover of Smash Hits, and very quickly, most pop stars really wanted to be on the cover of Smash Hits.
When we started the band, we kind of aimed at getting our first Smash Hits cover as a target of, you know, when we're going to be successful.
Happy days. Graham Coxon on the cover of Smash Hit.
It changed a bit.
Why can't someone say, you look stupid, sort your hair out? I mean, that's what people are paid for, right?
That's the one that comes back to haunt us time and time again. Is it me, Karen? Give it. That is so revolting.
I hated this. I hated this cover.
Chris is sporting the very popular sailor look of early 1988.
When this came out, it was the biggest selling issue we'd ever had. It's not exactly rocket science to work out why. A good-looking guy from an incredibly famous band with not many clothes on in a swimming pool. Hello.
Who to put on the cover is always, you know, 50% of what an editor spends their time agonising about. And so you've always got your dream ticket. And so let's say in those days it was Debbie Harry over here, okay? Really, really hard to get. And then over here you'd have Toyah. And Toyah was so easy to get that we used to talk about her as being in reception. There's this notional place, reception, where there was a line of people who were always ready to play ball. And Toyah would be there to the forefront.
Toyah was just a really exceptional pop star. We always felt that her records were pretty ropey. And they're a bit contrived. But obviously 11-year-old girls weren't worried about that.
I wrote the lyrics to my songs by the time I was 12. So the lyrics were about school rebellion, they were about family rebellion. And I think I hit it off with the smash hit readers because I was one of the first people that said, I'm sorry, but I ain't female, I'm a human being, I'm a character, I'm a person. And I think I appealed to a lot of young girls and a lot of young boys that saw me as the spirit of rebellion.
She made these fantastic videos, usually just Toyah making a internationally recognised hand gesture at her parents. And she would put more effort, I swear to God, into having her face painted with little tiny seagulls and having her hair teased up into a great cascade of purple hair extensions than she probably put into making her records. And I think she had her priorities right, because if you put Toyah on the cover of the magazine, it stood out from everything else.
The popularity of these new colourful pop stars meant that the old serious music press was soon under threat from the new populist smash hits.
What you've got to do is to flash back to the period of time when I was working at the NME. Now, fact number one is it was dominated by boys. Fact number two, boys, when they're together in an office, tend to resort to a kind of puerile behaviour. And so when Smash Hits came along, of course, its name was S-Hits, Smash Hits. And it just simply looked like shits. And that, therefore, just opened the floodgates. So you had things like pop dung, pop guana, pop excrement, pop dumps. And it was almost as if it were a kind of war of ideology. Because on the one hand, you had this newspaper that had its roots in that pop and rock could change the world. And this other magazine that didn't want to change the world, it just kind of wanted to change its shirt occasionally.
And luckily for Smash Hits, the number of shirt changes was definitely on the increase.
Over the past few weeks, the pop music scene and the fashion scene have been influenced by a new youth cult, whose devotees claim that their movement will be as influential as punk and far more positive.
Punk become like a uniform, and it become very stale. Where we are, the whole idea is complete change, all the time moving on.
We didn't really know that we were going to be spawning a movement. They tried to call us the Cult with No Name, Club for Heroes Kids, and then eventually the name The New Romantics stuck, which I think we all truthfully hated that name. For me anyway, I think we were the first pioneers in creating that video format, whereas it wasn't just a band jumping up on stage with their instruments. We'd actually made like a mini movie, and on a very low budget.
MTV, music television. Don't get caught without it.
With the birth of MTV in the United States, there was now a huge shop window for a new generation of pop stars as interested in presentation and style as they were in content.
What was inevitable was there was going to be a kind of music that was going to come along, a new youth cult, a new pop culture that would take the baton from punk and soul and glam, that would be incredibly visual, but at the same time hugely commercial and wanted to be commercial.
Well, I suppose the breakthrough really was the new romantic movement, Spandau Ballet and Duran Duran. Because those people just didn't work for the music press at all. I mean, the concept of Duran Duran does not work on horrible old, inky, smudgy, broadsheet paper. It only really works pin sharp, printed in colour.
I always thought Smash Hits was like the Miami Vice of magazines. It was the colour of the format, you know. Certain colours of it were very 80s. And you say the 80s and people go, ah! It's like, well, bollocks to that, actually. You know, what was wrong with it?
I mean, a couple of mullets here and there, you can be forgiven for that. But in terms of pop music, this country was churning out shitloads of it, and now it's sad. It doesn't do it.
In the classroom, there was a little bit of rivalry with who liked Spandau Ballet, who liked Duran Duran, and I always stuck up for Duran Duran. Spandau Ballet were a little bit naff.
The rivalry went on for years, even down to drinking and partying. It would always be the last one to stay up. I remember our star player, John, our drummer, getting stretchered off very early one night, which was upsetting to all of us.
Genuine rivalry between us and Spandau. Actually, really, not a great deal. We were more pop-orientated, should I say. And some might say we were just better songwriters, but I'll leave that to others.
Princess Diana, of course, has gone on record as saying you're her favourite band. How do you feel about that?
Super. It's really wonderful. Historically, out of all the male pop stars, I guess John Taylor's probably the one who... I think he won, maybe it was, I think he won the most fanciable male category in the poll 7 times. So John Taylor, who's mercifully still a bit of a looker now, has still got that burden to carry all his life, because for a huge sector of humanity, he'll always be John Taylor, who was the most fanciable male. And what effect this has on somebody, I have no idea.
I mean, it was hard to stay humble through that. I mean, I thank God that we were a band, because I think if I'd have been George Michael, it would have completely screwed me up, I think.
With bands like Duran Duran, including, of course, the gorgeous John Taylor, featuring regularly in full frontal shiny colour, the magazine proved irresistible to its readers.
You always read the stuff in magazines, you know. The postman had a hernia bringing in the mailbag the other day. Well, I'm here to tell you that's rubbish, OK? Except when it was smash hits. You know, win a pair of Nick Hayward socks. Me.
I mean...
There's no point writing to the band, because you won't get a bloody reply, but if you write to smash hits...
Exactly.
Roger, this one's from Catherine Chatburn, and that's how old were you on your first date?
I think I was actually about 14. It's quite a late starter.
Duranis, as they were called, started this whole convention of adopting the surname of the member of Duran Duran that you most fancied, which just made it quite complicated, actually, because 3 of them, of course, were called Taylor. But I was out in Australia, and there was a girl there who said, it took a long time for me to stop calling myself Claire Le Bon. I was Claire Le Bon at school, I was Claire Le Bon to all my friends, I got my parents to call me Claire Le Bon. Effectively, I was married to Simon Le Bon in my head at the age of 14, and nothing could separate us.
People used to write to smash hits about the miners' strike, because they just felt they had to correspond. In the early 80s, a few thousand teenagers every evening somewhere in Britain would sit down with a piece of Forever Friends notepaper and would write something. I don't think that's happening anymore.
And 3, as it always has been, the priority for the staff of Smash Hits is to fill a magazine with the most alluring stars.
What's out in the weeks that we're out?
Westlife.
Like Simply Red.
Yeah, Simply Red, really good, actually.
20 years ago, this was considerably easier. Record sales were booming, Smash Hits had become the pop Bible, and the new golden age of British pop was upon us, with some unlikely fans.
It's a very successful British industry, exporting, doing extremely well in overseas markets, generating a great deal of wealth and jobs, all the things I could ask of an industry.
You know, the 80s was a gift. It's all about the good things that pop music's about. It's sort of self-referential, witty, colourful. It's just smart.
I liked Wham. Yeah, but who did you like in Wham? Did you like Andrew?
Michael.
See, and I liked Andrew, so, yeah.
How are you actually feeling now?
On the mend, definitely on the mend.
Thought of him losing his voice and career's being finished. An awful strain. But he's better now, isn't he?
You're lovingly nursing him.
Right from the beginning, the imagery of Wham was very homoerotic. What came across always was this incredibly intimate friendship. It wasn't homosexual, it was homoerotic. It's the sort of thing you get in those Bollywood movies when the 2 guys go off to the brothel together. But at the end of the movie, no matter how much they got involved with the girls, they always throw the girls off and go off together. And it was like, you know, you had Shirley and Pepsi there with them, but there was nothing about Shirley and Pepsi that made you think they were sleeping with the guys. It was just the 2 guys had this intimacy, and there were 1 or 2 photographs which really did look like they were pretty sexual, you know, and sort of, as if they'd just been caught in a barn or something and the door had been opened and they were shocked by it.
If you look at old Wham videos like Club Tropicana or the old album covers, there's a huge homoerotic kind of tension going on between Andrew and George. I don't know whether we see that in retrospect because we know that George is gay now, we can read that into it. But to an extent, yeah, it was there. And it's quite funny to see that, how people could have been sort of like blind to that at the time.
But for the two frontmen of one 80s pop group, you'd have to have been practically myopic to have missed their sexual orientation.
The best possible pop group is one that includes you in their gang and excludes your parents. And Frankie Goes to Hollywood were just their traumatising parents. The fact that two of them were gay, which is very exciting in itself, because you're at an age where you're not even entirely sure what homosexuality means. And that was really exciting because the magazine that was going to print the lyrics to their first single, you know, had some real editorial value. And playground debate, which is what Smash Hits was about so much, you know, was our ability to understand what kids were talking about.
One of the biggest teen talking points of all time was, is that a girl or a boy?
My earliest memory of reading Smash Hits was seeing Boy George on the front cover. Nobody could work out if he was a boy or a girl. He had loads of makeup on, and to me that made a statement about where pop music was going.
The first time we appeared on Top of the Pops, they were like, what is it? What is it? Is it a transvestite? All this sort of stuff. It was like hysteria. But the public just decided they liked me, and that was it. So I can remember sort of going down to sort of Notting Hill Gate and all these like black women come out going, yeah man, you're wicked, yeah, I love you here, and all that stuff. And it was like people just liked me. It was just this weird sort of reaction that people couldn't stop.
I thought the best pop star of the whole lot really was Boy George. I mean, Boy George was an unbelievable pop star. The way he played with the look and with sexuality, and he was great at giving witty quotes.
I consider myself to be pretty masculine. I don't know whether you do, but then that's beside the point. I think a lot of people talked about the 80s as being a very surface culture, but I think it's worse now. When you look at sort of a lot of the pop bands now, it's like they have such arrogant expectations because they're told that, you know, you just sprinkle a bit of stylist and a bit of choreographer, teach them how to dance, you know, how to dress, and boof, you're a star. So it's almost like they want the fur coat before they've done any work. Whereas in our day, there were no expectations. You didn't think you were going to be big anywhere, like big in America. So everything that happened was exciting. Whereas now it's almost like, well, this is what's going to happen, and this is how long your career is going to be, and whatever, then you'll end up back in a chip shop in Bracknell, you know.
Boy George was always going to be a tabloid issue. There hadn't really been a pop star before Boy George who was going to be a huge tabloid issue. It hadn't been on for years, really. It was the start of, you know, this kind of ghastly celebrity culture we now wallow in.
These days, everybody wants to be a cover star. But if you're a 15-year-old girl from Rochdale in 1984, only one man could fix it for you.
Now then, a letter from Kirkholt, Rochdale, Lancs. Dear Jim, please could you fix it for me to be on the front of a Smash Hits magazine with a pop singer? Yours sincerely, Miranda Jane Jardine.
I knew that they always put a pop star on the cover of Smash Hits, so I knew I'd have to be on. I couldn't go on the cover by myself. That'd be no good. I had to go on with a pop star.
I think we were trying to fix it, that we had Wham on the that we had Wham on the cover because they were just the biggest commercial driver at the time. And that probably would have been the ideal situation for the lucky girl who was on the cover. But Wham didn't happen, or they fell out at the last minute. And obviously, at times like that, you turn to Marilyn. I don't know what her reaction was. She was probably absolutely mortified at getting her expecting to meet Andrew Ridgeley. And you get this strange-looking androgynous creature who was about 6'3" and a bit stubbly.
Oh, really upset. I mean, because I was a 15-year-old teenager, you know, about to meet her idols, and then suddenly they weren't there. I just remember going, having a bath and sitting in the bath and crying. You know, I wanted to meet George Michael.
At first I thought, it's a bit cheeky, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, a second choice, and I didn't actually need the publicity at that particular time. I was on everything except grandmother's toilet roll. But I actually thought, OK, yeah, I'll do it, even though it sounded about as appealing as a hemorrhectomy. So 1, 2, 3. I mean, for a professional, it's hard work. But for a novice, I mean, I can imagine it's like being beamed to Mars and expected to know how their society works. In those kind of circumstances, I can empathise. I mean, I'm not a monster. But a couple of times, I, you know, almost lost the plot.
What did it make you feel like? Did you feel good?
Yeah.
Marilyn, what can I say? You've been a great guy, as it happens.
I've never met Jimmy Savile in my life. I've met the person in the tracksuit with all the gold and everything. I've no disrespect Jimmy. Like he gives a shit what I think anyway. Likewise. He's on a different planet.
Good heavens. How about that, ladies and gentlemen?
Who's that girl? Not with Wham, but with Marilyn. Oh, it must have been mortifying for her.
I actually lost my... Well, I didn't lose my cover of it. I actually cut my face out at the time because I didn't like it. But now I look back at it, I think it's fantastic.
Marilyn wasn't the only one acting charitably. Bob Geldof had persuaded the nation's top pop stars to come together to aid starving Ethiopians. But they weren't all that ready.
Oh, I looked a right mess. You know, it's funny actually, because in those days I did used to kind of be quite sort of, you know, I never left the house without makeup on. I mean, if you see me in that video, I thought, my God, what do you look like? You know, so I sort of like 2 hairdos going on. I had like sort of hardly any makeup on. But people say, oh, you look great in that video. I'm like, you must be mad. Like a bloody deranged housewife. I don't think I knew quite what I was walking into. I thought I was sort of going along to do a bit of vocals for this charity record. I didn't realise it was going to be like the whole world's media there. But, you know, they did that bit at the end where they got everybody in. Even people that couldn't really sing, you know, and sort of had them all sort of like pretending to mouth along to people that could. I remember that. That was funny. That caused a few dramas after. But there was a quite nice feeling to it because it was like, for one night only, you know, people had sort of suppressed their huge egos to do this fantastic charitable act.
I'd been tipped off the day before this incredible event was going to happen. Smash Hits and the Daily Mirror had the world exclusive. I went to the office the next day as the editor and slung my weight around and said, listen, we've got a new cover story. Band-Aid. Every single pop musician in the country, I've never seen anything like it. There was a pause and they said, but we've got Strawberry Switchblade on the cover. And I lost the argument, and we went out with Strawberry Switchblade on the cover, these 2 vampish-looking girls who had a non-career. They were almost immediately down the dumper, actually. And just a little tiny indent in the top, little drop-in picture of Band-Aid.
I tend to break the decade down into before and after Band-Aid. Really, after Live Aid, it became important to have an agenda. And I remember feeling like U2, Sting in particular, Peter Gabriel, moved in.
Teens quickly tired of rainforests and the Cold War. Waiting in the wings was British pop's very own King Midas.